Well, Netflix are like notoriously cagey with their stats, which is hard and frustrating when you come from the world of YouTube and you have like deep analytics on like all your stuff. And then you go to Netflix and you get nothing.
Welcome back to Creator Generation. This week we are joined by Max Miller. Love alliteration. It's the only way to go. Hey Max, how you going?
Good, thank you. And how's it going?
Good, mate. Hey, so you're a director. You do YouTube stuff. You do a whole bunch of other stuff. Maybe you do a better introduction than that from me. You do it.
Sure. So yeah, I work as a director and producer, both like across kind of like longer form and short form stuff. Most notably, working as a director with Aunty Donna comedy group across our YouTube and our recent TV series with Netflix, and then also kind of producing with our production company, Having You Done Well Productions, and the different kind of comedy stuff we do through there. So, kind of living a world through comedy, both directing and producing.
Love it. That was actually super humble. We can play word bingo on the word humble today. But let's go to the start. Like, what does this look like? Like, it starts with Aunty Donna. Is maybe that way we could kick off?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I guess like I suppose the beginning for me was to wanting to be a director and a filmmaker, and studying that at uni, doing the film and TV production course at Swinburne, and then at the same time had some friends from high school who were doing an acting, studying acting at a different university, and with some other people there met up and kind of wanted to start doing comedy. And then being the kind of filmmaker friend of the group, we kind of chatted one day and it was like, oh, we should film some comedy sketches, with the initial kind of intention being to just film some stuff to try and get into the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, as a live show. So Aunty Donna kind of started as just wanting to be a live act. And so we filmed those sketches and then did get into the comedy festival and had that first show. And then from there, kind of got asked to do some sketches for a Channel 31 show, which is the community TV channel in Victoria. And so we did that, we made those, and that was fun. And then at the end, we kind of thought, well, we might as well, we've just got these sketches now, let's put them up on YouTube. This was also 10 years ago. Need to like give that context. So we kind of like, YouTube was obviously a thing that everybody knew of, but it wasn't like kind of having a channel and being a YouTuber was still kind of a bit foreign. And we certainly weren't really across that or like had any intentions or desire to kind of do that, and be YouTubers, and that this was going to thing we were going to try and grow. We just kind of had these sketches and thought, well, we'll put them up in a place that people can watch them. And we did that, and we had like 1,000 views on some of the videos, and we thought that was really cool and kind of liking it. And then kind of had the one morning we woke up a couple of weeks later, and one of the sketches had 200,000 views,
Whoa.
because it had been posted on Reddit.
Oh,
And that was kind of the start for us to then realize, oh, this is cool. This is a thing that maybe we should be pursuing and doing more of and trying to grow. So yeah, it was kind of like, yeah, not intentional to be like, to have a YouTube channel necessarily, and that was going to be such a big part of our lives then going forward. But yeah, like I said as well, at that time, it was like less of an obvious kind of path to take 10 years ago. And yeah, but that kind of really sparked us off. And then we had another sketch from that series that then also kind of got a jump of 100 or so thousand views. And so we really like, really got us excited. And from then we kind of decided that we wanted to do more for YouTube and really kind of grow that channel. And we kind of have ever since.
Hey, Max, I forgot something that's pretty important here. Like, as an Australian interested in this sort of stuff, most like Aussies in comedy will know who Aunty Donna is and understand your comedy and what it is, and probably hopefully anyone who's elsewhere has checked it out on YouTube and the Netflix series, which we'll get into. But for those who don't know Aunty Donna, like, how do you describe your comedy? Like, I call it batshit crazy sketch comedy that is just kind of off the wall, but I don't know if that's the official line.
That's pretty good. That's more or less the line. Yeah. So it's Aunty Donna is like, yeah, we're a sketch comedy group. It's doing very kind of like, yeah, absurd and surreal kind of comedy. So it's definitely more alternative and a bit more niche. Um, we're a group of six people. So there's the three kind of on-screen performers, Broden, Mark, and Zach. They also write the sketches along with a fourth writer who's not on screen, Sam. And then there's myself as a director, editor, shooter, kind of bit of everything as filmmaker, and then also Tom who does all the music and sound. So we're kind of like a group of yeah six friends from back in kind of high school uni days that have kind of like just grown this comedy group. All people with yeah like-minded comedy tastes, I guess, and particularly things that are just kind of yeah a bit weirder and a bit sillier and a bit crazier in comedy tastes.
I want to ask a question about that. I mean, most YouTubers or most people who have done really well online, they're typically like one person, or maybe two maximum. But you've got like five or six people, and that's been like that from the start. So you basically started with a team and had to grow it as a team. How have you found that journey, considering you've got to keep so many people together?
It has been hard actually, and at times, and like I think it is one of probably almost one of our greatest achievements actually is just staying together. I think that like for a lot of people, who want to kind of start anything, or like if you're being a YouTuber or just starting a company or a group or a band or whatever it is, the hardest thing is like keeping people together, and even when it's like two people, three people, but for six people to kind of really commit to for all this period of time, I think has been a big thing because it really takes like a big buy-in from everybody. Everybody's got to be really kind of like committed to it early on and then really stick with it, particularly through like, you have like the initial honeymoon kind of phase, but then once that kind of fades off, that's kind of the
Yeah.
trickiest part once it's like, what are we doing, like with our lives?
Yeah.
It's just like you kind of like, you've had some little bit of success, but yeah, with a couple of sketches that got a few good views on YouTube, but it's like now what? And it's like kind of yeah pushing through and kind of really committing to it is just so important. I assume that like obviously don't have any stats on this, but like most things fail because people just don't they stop trying or they stop committing to it. So I think it's one of the biggest killers is that, and we've managed to kind of get by it. And I think just like I said, just that kind of like we've always had that big buy-in from everybody. And having the six people has kind of helped in a way because it kind of does. We can spread workloads, but also having the more people has always made it feel a bit more of a like. Um, it's like playing a team sport. You kind of like if you play like basketball on a Monday night, you kind of have to go because it's like, you don't want to let the other people down, and so
Yeah.
it's kind of like yeah, a bit of that as well. I think like having the group, it's harder to kind of not commit. Where there's only two of you and you kind of like it's a bit easier to kind of pull out of, I think.
Mm.
So it
For
might
sure.
have helped. But yeah, it's definitely one of the toughest parts.
I think though that interestingly, so obviously not on the same scale as you, but my husband and I, we run our channel Little Grey Box together, and doing it together gives it such a deep meaning. It's like it brings you so close because you're really in the trenches together, kind of thing. And everything you achieve together. Every failure you have, you're not alone. You have each other, and having those goals together, it's so inspiring. You're always working towards something as a team. I don't know. I think I really value having that ability to work with him like that. And when we work with clients, you kind of notice the difference of like having people whose job it is versus you when it's your full life. It's really inspiring, right?
Yeah, totally. I think so. It's like yeah, it's like kind of like also I guess like having a because it's a sport analogy again, but like having a gym buddy.
Yeah.
It's like that person that kind of helps you kind of get a bit more motivated and forces you to do things where if it's just on your own, you can kind of maybe it's easier to just like be a bit lazy and stuff with it. And it's kind of nice having that working with other people,
Yeah,
that collaborative kind of environment is always really fun.
absolutely.
And can I ask? I mean, comedy is super hard. Like, anyone who's ever tried it will know that. But you've got all these people coming together, and your timing, your chemistry, it all just worked. And like, you were friends from school, which is great, but getting all those elements to work together, from the directing to the acting to the music to the writing, that must have been something tricky to do, right?
Yeah, I think I think yeah, probably don't have a great answer other than it was kind of, I guess, just lucky in some ways that we kind of just did have similar tastes. Like they, kind of, I think it started talking about wanting to do comedy things while they were, together at, at acting university. And and then I was doing filmmaking, but also just happened to like, comedy was a huge thing for me growing up, watching comedy and loving comedy. And then also as a director, I've always been drawn to like very visual, kind of like high energy kind of things. And then Auntie Donna style of comedy just happens to really marry with that really well,
Hmm.
because it is just very crazy and high energy and that kind of thing. So like, yeah, I guess like my natural style like really kind of just happened to work with what they were kind of like, writing. So yeah, I think it's just in some ways there is just that bit of a fortuitous kind of connection there. And it's not something that we've had to like, it's just something we've kind of just almost unspokenly kind of grown over the time as well. So like it wasn't like a big sit down and plan. It's just like what we've all naturally brought to the project. And I think it's like also helped why we've stayed together is because we are quite naturally minded people in terms of like our, yeah, taste and style and what we've kind of bought into to make.
It has to have its challenges, though, right? Directing for YouTube.
It's more so I feel like for the writing maybe than in the directing in some ways, just because like in terms of like what you're writing and making for YouTube in terms of like the type of content, the
Mm.
length of the content, the tone of the content, that kind of thing, and what works well. And then for me, like if I don't really because now like a big question I get asked is like when we did, I'm sure if we'll get to this, but like a longer form TV thing,
Mm.
like do direct differently for
Yeah.
like YouTube to that, and the answer is not really. Like
No, right.
it's kind of, I feel like for me as a director, it's kind of still the same process, of going through and how you kind of plan for a shoot, the way you kind of break down a script, shot list out a script, kind of work with the production designer or the DOP and the wardrobe designer.
Mm.
Um, all those things don't really change too much. It's just really like kind of more what's on the page that's different, for the different formats.
And look, like you said, you have done some pretty amazing things. We will talk about the Netflix series in a moment, but I just want to talk about perceptions for a second. Obviously, you guys came from, grassroots, getting onto YouTube. Obviously, your content did very well. You then crossed over to some more traditional aspects in traditional TV, and then onto, a platform like Netflix. What was the perception of being a YouTube or YouTube director and your ability to take that across? Like, well, what are people, when you tell people what you did and what you wanted to do, were there any sort of ums and ahs about you getting involved in the YouTube to traditional approach?
Yeah, well, there's definitely it was, I guess, both a gift and a curse being like YouTubers, because you do become very much branded with that, and that's great for our YouTube channel and everything we were trying to do there and kind of grow our online presence and everything. But definitely in the traditional media world, it was like, yeah, very quickly kind of branded as that, even though Auntie Donna was just as much a live act, from the very beginning as it was a YouTube group. We were kind of always known as that. And if the guys are doing a live thing and they were being introduced, it was like, and YouTube is Auntie Donna, and or like if there was an article in a magazine or something, it'd be like Auntie Donna are YouTubers from who started in blah blah blah. So it was kind of always be kind of branded at that. And when you're kind of doing things like, yeah, like media, yeah, interviews or like live things, it was definitely kind of having that branding. But then also when we're trying to do longer form TV stuff, I think it was really tough in the early days as well to get past that a bit. It was a bit like, oh, this is the thing, you do these short videos on YouTube, that that means that's not going to work for you. It means you can't do a long form. It's very different, and it's half an hour episodes, and it's you kind of just do that but not this. And so I think it was definitely hard, really hard to kind of break that a bit. And definitely, I mean, the style of comedy is also definitely more alternative and everything, which doesn't, help when you're trying to, especially in Australia where the market, TV market is so small and so few comedies are made. If you're kind of like, yeah, a bit alternative as well, it's a hard sell. But then also having that YouTube branding just seemed like a thing that's like not really that had been done. Like in Australia, we've now had that also with Superwog, who have had two successful seasons of their TV show. So it's awesome to see that like there are YouTubers who are transitioning into TV and doing well to kind of prove the point. I think it's just like a slow kind of changing of the mindset, particularly for the kind of older TV world, to catch up onto like the online kind of world and how it's not actually that different to the TV and stuff. So yeah, it's been a kind of a long process trying to get through that.
Yeah, right.
So obviously you got through that though,
Yeah.
right? Because you convinced Netflix and a whole bunch of other people, but let's go to Netflix to trust you guys. So
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's also worth noting as well that like when we started, Screen Australia didn't have any funding for online production. It was only like film and TV, and that was very much just again the mindset. And now they have an amazing online production fund, and fund lots of great online shows. So that's kind of like it's been interesting seeing that transition of when like it wasn't like really a regarded thing to now it's like something that Screen Australia really supports, um, as well as the more kind of state funders too. So there's definitely been that change and everything. And with Netflix, I think yeah, it was kind of. I mean, they're definitely a lot less reserved in that regard, and also an enormous company that can afford to take more risks and that kind of thing as well. So in Australia, like I was saying, it's hard if you're kind of making one, if a network is making one, maybe two comedies a year at best, that they're going to pick something that they think might have a bit of a niche audience. Whereas Netflix, who are making, 10 shows a week, can afford to have take a bit of a punt on like a sketch show from Australia. To make. And they were looking to make sketch shows at the time as well. So they kind of like funded a few other sketch shows when they kind of greenlit ours. So it was like that was a kind of a thing they were doing at the time. So the fact that they can have just like a period where they kind of greenlight a bunch of sketch shows is also just shows how much scope they have to make stuff. So it's just a bit of a different world.
hey, just a quick interruption. We have the Creator Generation Discord community. Join your fellow creators from all over the world. We are here to help you grow, thrive, succeed, help each other be accountable and get it done. So hit the link, join us in the Discord. I look forward to seeing you there.
It is a dream of many, I think, creators to have a Netflix show at some point. So could you sort of tell us, like, how did that go? Like, what was the journey from
Hi,
Phoebe is
Netflix,
one
if
of
you're
them,
listening.
going from YouTube going from YouTube to Netflix, like how did that happen? Like what was the process? How did they approach you or you approached them, and then how did that transition
Spare no
occur?
detail.
Well, it was quite a long journey that kind of started. I think there's a short version and a long version. But if it's spare no detail, I guess like I think the full picture kind of also helps to paint like how long of a process it can be, and also how long that takes. Like straight off the top, we got the Netflix series about 8 years into our life as Aunty Donna. So certainly no overnight kind of thing to happen. And kind of how it started is like about 4 years into Aunty Donna, we got like an email from some random guy on the internet, who claimed he was like a kind of talent manager in LA, and that he had liked our stuff online and kind of wanted to help represent us over there. He said his name of his company, but there was like no website. Kind of Googled them and they had a bit of a presence, but not really. And I was like, this sounds like we're being catfished, and we didn't trust this guy. But we kind of like, why not? We just kept chatting and had a few Skypes and stuff. And he seemed like a real person, but we still didn't really know like what his whole deal was. And then that was like, then a couple of years later, he emailed and was like, hey, you should actually just come over to LA for a week and do some meetings. Like, I'll help set them up for you. And we're like, okay. So we all bought flights and accommodation and stuff, and hoping this was going to be something, and went there, and sure enough, he was a real person, and he did work for a real talent kind of agency company thing. And he had set up some meetings for us. So um, we did them. We did about 10, and 9 of them didn't come to anything, but one did, and we kind of had a bit of a relationship with a production company over there called Pacific Electric. And again, that started like another like 2 3 year kind of like, yeah, 2 year kind of chat, back and forth of just like ideas here and there and trying to work on things. And then yeah, over that time we kind of narrowed in on this kind of like sketch show idea with all the guys living in a house, and it was like all these different sketches, and there's a loose narrative for each episode, and that kind of thing. And eventually they kind of once we kind of settled with that, they were able to um, set us up with some pitches and stuff, some pitch meetings to kind of pitch the show. They'd also kind of partnered up with Universal, who were involved at the time but later pulled out. And so that kind of like helped get us in the door. So we kind of pitched to Netflix, Amazon, and Apple, for the show, and Amazon and Apple passed, and Netflix said yes. So um, that was kind of, yeah, I guess the journey. So it was, it started from this kind of seemingly random guy who just found our stuff on YouTube, who liked the videos, to then many years later going over and having some meetings that he set up, to then meeting these people in those meetings, Pacific Electric, who then a couple of years later helped us get up with Universal and then pitch to Netflix. So it did kind of really start from the simplest of things, which is, yeah, just having some videos on YouTube that someone in LA saw and liked. So it can, start from the simplest kind of thing, and then it's a long kind of journey from there.
And once you got the go ahead, what happened next?
So, well, the go ahead was that was kind of a really stressful time, because it was like we got the kind of what we thought was official green light, and then a year later we were still hadn't progressed to anything. So we had like 12 months of sitting around
Wow.
not knowing like what was actually going on, if anything was going to happen, because we didn't see any contracts. Kind of conversations went quiet for a bit. Um, and it was just kind of like we put off doing a live show that year. We put off doing other things because we didn't know if we were just going to get the call to be like, okay, we're ready now, come over and make the show. It was just, we just didn't know what was going on for 12 months. So it was a lot of sitting around, and it was a very kind of awkward, stressful time. And yeah, it really impacted other things that we were doing. And eventually kind of became a thing where we had to set the deadline of being like, it was getting to the end of that year, and we're like, we need to start working on a live show for next year. If the Netflix is not happening, we need to know. And we said, we it was just us saying to Netflix in the end, we need to make the show by the end of this year, or we're not doing it, kind of thing. um I don't know what would have happened if they, if they then didn't make it happen that year, but they did. Then they said, okay, let's do it. Like, and then literally a week later, we were on a plane flying over to LA to start
Okay.
pre-production.
You bullied
So it
them.
was it
And
was so strange. It was like giving them the ultimatum. But then thank God we did, because we filmed it and wrapped before Christmas, and then finished post in March, and then COVID hit. And so
Wow.
if it had been delayed like another 2 months or something, or another couple of months, then we might not have been able to do it. So yeah, the timing in the end was, thank God we just snuck it in.
Wow.
so you, from the time you said yes, come over, you actually went there, you did post, you wrapped it in how many weeks? Like normally TV
Yeah,
shows
that's
take
quick.
months or years to get, you know, done. You did it in a couple of weeks?
No, no, it was like, so a lot of the some of the writing we definitely had started here. A lot of the writing had been done, and then when we got over there, we had about 5 weeks of pre-production. Like, so the guys were kind of doing redrafts while on the scripts, while I was starting pre-production with the crew, and getting all that kind of shoot stuff ready. Which was like kind of officially 4 weeks of pre-production, with crew coming on and building the set and all that kind of stuff. And then we had a 4 week shoot, which took us up to Christmas. And then we were editing for 3 months. So from like New Year's to kind of mid March. So less than 3 months. Yeah, more like 2.5 probably. And by mid March, we kind of had all the edits done. There was still a few kind of notes and stuff on the last few episodes that we did remotely when we came came back home. And then we still had to do the sound mix, color grade, VFX, titles, all that kind of stuff, which all happened remotely. And then I think we did handed in the final delivery was probably like June. Um, so yeah, the post period was still probably like 5 months, at least I would say.
And did the whole process, I mean, you went and you directed like a TV-esque show at that point? Or was it your first real experience in directing something that big?
Yeah, definitely for that budget and that length,
Mm.
was yeah the biggest. Like the only other kind of like longer thing like that I directed was we had done two different TV pilots in Australia, over the years before Netflix. So they were kind of only like longer form things like that I directed. And I'd worked on feature films, in other roles, like when I was younger and stuff as well. So I'd kind of seen how like bigger productions and stuff had worked, which was good. But yeah, directing 6 half-hour episodes with that budget and in that time was definitely a new experience.
And what was it like actually directing like other, famous actors? Like, did you do the Ed Helms episode, for example, or Egg Helms episode? Should I say?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I directed all the episodes, so it was across like everyone that was in and stuff. Yeah, it's fine. It's just like anything else. It's just I think just treat it normally. It's like it's any kind of yeah a normal person. We've also had like the been lucky to work with some awesome like big name Australian comedians and stuff when we've done stuff here. So yeah, whether it's someone well known here or well known in America, it's still just kind of yeah treating it the same and everything. But Ed was lovely. But Ed also like he was an executive producer at Pacific Electric, which was the company that we worked with to get the show up. So he was involved in the making of the show, and we kind of had spoken to him quite a bit before that and stuff as well. And he helped like pitch the show, so he was in the room in the pitch to Netflix and stuff. Um,
Right.
so yeah, but then yeah, and then the other people on the show and everything, yeah, everybody was great and didn't have anyone that was hard to work with or anything like that.
There has to be some story, right? Like some crazy story that happened from production, something you can tell us that you're like, oh man, that's a movie moment.
No, no.
I think the dishwasher was a real pain was it the dishwasher or the washing machine was a real pain
The
in the ass to
dishwasher,
work with.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
real pain in the ass talent. That
real
one.
pain
I've
in the
heard.
ass.
Yeah, around
Always
Hollywood they're
singing.
famous. Yeah.
But no, everybody was like, oh, yeah, everybody was really good and like, yeah, it's very professional. And I'm trying to think if there's anything interesting, but I really don't think there was. Like, yeah.
Max just so humble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so humble. Yeah.
And not willing to burn any
Yeah.
bridges either.
Smart.
Smart, very smart.
Very smart.
But I mean, clearly it's a long journey from from early conversation where you're getting potentially catfished to actually getting something like this made. So I think that's kind of an important thing to understand. Is it like what about the difference in having that complete control? Like you guys obviously with your live shows and YouTube and everything else, you have and the podcast, you've got complete control, right? And then I'm assuming once you start working with a couple of production companies and Netflix, that may not be the case, or do you just get to do what you want?
Yeah, so the awesome thing about working with them is that yeah, they were really kind of hands off with a lot of the production and the development and stuff, which was really great. So they gave notes, during the writing, and then during the edit, but it was a very fair and kind of very reasonable amount of notes and fine notes and stuff, and like they didn't really like impede much at all, and in fact said to us when we got there and started pre-production, they were like, we're going to be mostly pretty hands off. We want you guys to do what you do. We'll give you some notes and guidance, but at the end of the day, make the show you want to make, which was the most incredible thing you could like ever hear, particularly because it was the opposite of our experience that we had in Australia, where like things we had worked on had gotten a lot of notes and been funneled into certain directions. So yeah, and they didn't really like. I think they came to set like one day but like they were kind of pretty, yeah, pretty hands off. And if they had a note that we were strongly against, if we had a good enough argument, we could also like kind of, yeah, get it over the line as well in that kind of way too. So yeah, they were really good, and I think it just shows. Like I think we definitely felt before the show came out, we said no matter how it did, we felt like we were really proud of it, and that it was
Oh,
like the best thing that we could have ever made. And it
love
comes
it.
from just, yeah, having that kind of being allowed to do what you want to do, and it just makes so much sense. It's so obvious of a thing because it's like from Netflix point of view, it's like you're hiring these people who have been making stuff for 8 years, and you want them to make that, then why would you get in the way? Just like
Mm.
if you're getting a creative person to do the thing that they have been doing most of their lives, then let them do it. Whereas, yeah, but it's also part of like, I guess the Netflix can afford to be a bit probably looser with that because again, they're making so much stuff.
Mm.
It's less pressure on one single show. Whereas in Australia, if there's one or two comedies being made, it has to be perfect and reach the most amount of audience and all that kind of thing. And so there's a lot more chefs and it's a lot more pressure on it being a success.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas, yeah, Netflix can probably afford to be a bit more hands off, but it's also just, I think, a smart approach and definitely one that we take when we do stuff as having done well as a production company, when we work with other comedy creators, is to be very hands off as well. Because it's like if we want to work with this person, it's
Mm.
because we love their comedy sensibility and we want them to, make a show that is of their sensibility. So, and not try and, yeah, control it.
So one question I have for you, Max, if I was, well, it is my life dream to follow a similar path as you. So, as somebody who has no experience, and I have gotten one catfish email in the past, and I was like, this guy can't be serious. He was, but COVID happened and got in the way. But what are some red flags? What are some things that you should look out for? Some things that say, hey, maybe this would be indicative of maybe a working relationship that isn't going to end well, or yeah, things to look out for as newbies.
It's hard to judge without a case by case basis, but I
Mm.
think, definitely, obviously, where the person's from is a huge aspect of it.
Mhm.
So if you don't know where they're from, then obviously that's a huge red flag. Or if they're from a thing but you're not really familiar with them, or like what they do, you don't kind of really align with like the stuff that they kind of make, or like usually kind of produce or whatever it is they do, then you definitely want to be connected with, if you're going to kind of connect with someone like that, it's like you want to make sure that they're of a similar mindset to you,
Mm.
and that the stuff they do, there's like, some relationship there between other stuff they've done and what you do,
Yeah, right.
to see that they're going to be a right fit. And then also, like, I guess just kind of always being very mindful of conversations you have, and just kind of, noticing any red flags that might come up, like in terms of like things they say, or things they might overpromise, or if it sounds like they're going to be very controlling, or like it sounds too good to be true, maybe, or something. Like there's just, yeah, it's kind of like just being across that. But I think a lot of it comes down to like who this person or company is and
Mm.
what they've done, and kind of seeing like how legitimate or not it might be, and how much stuff they've done in the past actually relates to what you do.
Awesome.
Have you
That's
said
helpful.
no to anything like that? Like any opportunities that was a good idea to say no, or you're kicking yourself you said
I'm
no to?
trying to think of like, I mean, it's obviously like the kind of more spammy ones. I remember in the early days we used to get so many of those
Yeah.
MSN
M-
emails. What were they? Those
MCN?
used to get like spam. MCN, that's it.
Yeah.
MCN, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
used to get spammed to death with those, of like being like, oh, we can like elevate your platform, and if you join with us. And now that seems so obviously like kind of like just like bullshit, but at the time it was, yeah. When you first get them, it's kind of, you don't know,
Mm.
so it can be hard to kind of judge. Once you've got your 20th email from a 20th different company, it's kind of not real. But uh, yeah, I think probably trying to think of like, we've had like definitely over the years like other producers at, like, usually like from America, who've got production companies, um, again, and they've seen our videos on YouTube and really liked it and said they want to work together and stuff. But um, like I think if that person was in Australia, they would have like some kind of actually a bit more credibility because you could more easily see what they've kind of done and kind of see where it kind of stands. But in America, there's this, I think a lot more, just so many more like producers and we think of the big kind of studio and production companies, but there's also a million small production companies, and they've all like maybe done like one TV show for the Lifestyle Channel or something like that, and but they say they want to make a comedy show and they love your videos and stuff. And like we've definitely had a few of that where it was like, and again in the early days, it's like a producer from America and they've done some TV shows that it sounds like it could be like really exciting. But then you look at the stuff that they made, and in most instances, it was like it didn't marry at all with what we were doing, and we never heard of the shows they'd made. Like they were real shows, but we never heard of them, and it was like different kind of genres and stuff. And it's like, I mean, on the one hand, it's like they are a producer in America and they have made TV shows, so maybe working with them could be an opportunity that could lead somewhere. But on the other hand, they don't make anything that we've kind of made, and it's like I haven't heard of them, and it seems like an odd fit. It doesn't seem like the right kind of
Mm.
marriage. So that's where it's kind of like I guess that case by case thing, but all coming down to like, does this person actually do stuff that relates to what you do? And not
Mm.
just jumping at it because it's like, oh, I'm a producer from America. Whereas like Pacific Electric, who we ended up partnering with, like obviously Ed Helms' company, and so they've done a lot of comedy, like a lot of great comedy things, comedy productions and stuff. So it just was like a much obvious choice. But obviously Ed Helms helps. It but just the stuff they'd made was a more obvious connection as well. So
And how was it received? I mean,
Mm.
I love the show, but I love that kind of comedy. But how's it received globally?
Well, Netflix are like notoriously cagey with their stats, which is hard and frustrating when you come from the world of YouTube and you have like
Yeah.
deep, deep analytics
Yeah.
on like all your stuff. And then you go to Netflix and you get nothing. So we only kind of like had like their word on it and like a brief word on in a couple of meetings after the show came out. But basically, they just said that it had done like really well in Australia, and also the UK and Canada were really strong. Um, and then the US was good, not as good as they had hoped, quite hoped, which was interesting. But um, yeah, like still decent. But yeah, Australia, as I said, did great, and UK was great, and then yeah, Canada was pretty good. So yeah, kind of all the countries that made sense, that make sense, and what we've seen in terms of like when we've toured and stuff as well, and that kind of thing. US was interesting actually because like our YouTube channel, by demographics, the US is actually our highest, more than Australia. Um, More people, I guess, but yeah, it sounds like with the series though, the Netflix series, it was much better in Australia than it was in the US. Also, not a
Mm.
surprise though, I think.
Would you do a season two?
We would, but I don't know if it's going to happen with Netflix or not. It's kind of yeah tricky because at the time when we were hoping we would going over, we're still in the kind of the kind of the peak of COVID and everything, and definitely and going back to LA was like an impossibility at that time. Um, and yeah, so it's been a bit unknown in terms of like I said, they were really happy with how it did here in the UK and stuff, but not so much in the US. So yeah, don't know what will happen. And they haven't. The only other sketch show they've given a season two to is been Tim Robinson's I Think You Should Leave. The other sketch shows they made have all not got season twos. Um, and yeah, it's a very Netflix thing to do, I guess.
Fair enough. Look, I guess one of the I think questions I wanted to ask, particularly for I guess the audience here, is like, what tips would you give for anyone who wants to do that, like go from YouTube to Netflix? We summarize a couple of key tips about that journey and how to make it happen.
A lot of the stuff we've talked about in terms of like those kind of relationships and kind of handling that has been a really big part of it. Otherwise, I suppose like I think it comes down to like what it is you're doing and what you're kind of like making your YouTube channel for and what you're growing it to be. Um, a big thing I think is that you kind of if you're doing something like you're starting a YouTube channel, like I think it's really good to be like specific and kind of targeted in what it is you do.
Mm.
So we didn't like, like for us, for example, it was always like the style of comedy that we do, which is a bit more niche. We've kind of always really stuck to. We haven't like tried to broaden it out to try and get more subs or anything like that. We do the thing that we do and try and really kind of specialize in that. And I think for anyone, it's like whatever it is you're doing for your channel, you should be specializing in that thing, whether it's a style of comedy or it's a style of analysis that you do, or like whatever it is your content is, or a type of cooking or whatever. Like it's just like you should be really kind of like, yeah, specialized in that, because I think people on YouTube, they come to your channel for that certain thing.
Mm.
So I think being, yeah, really kind of like committed and focused to that has been good, to the point where it's like you're kind of putting with YouTube in terms of connecting it to the Netflix, it really was just having like that catalog of stuff that we had made on our channel, that I think had been consistent in its kind of tone and style and what it does, that has let other people stumble across it and find it, and then if they like it, that's great, and then they can watch all the videos and they can get a bigger picture of like all the stuff that you've done, and if they like it, then that's a really great thing, because at the end of the day, yeah, that's how obviously I was saying the Netflix story started, which was just this guy who had seen our videos on YouTube, which I think is like, yeah, an exciting kind of like point to make. That's like,
Mm.
it's not like uh, it's not as if Netflix are gonna see your videos and give you a call and be like, hey, it's Netflix, we love your YouTube channel, want to make a show. Like it's not gonna work as
What?
like that, but it can still be that, like for us, it was a talent rep who did see our videos and did give us the call and be like, hey, I like your videos, I want to work with you. And then it's like a slow journey from there.
Mm.
But it's still that thing of like that random person stumbling across your stuff.
Mm.
And so if you've kind of, yeah, really kind of, and we by that point had like 4 years worth of content. So you could see that we were very kind of established and serious and had a consistent and established tone and style of comedy, and improved it over many years. I think all of that, went a long way to like selling us as like being a legitimate kind of thing, rather than just like
Mm.
something that we're just doing for fun for a bit, but not really that serious about or committed to or anything like that.
That's really helpful.
So what's next? Where does this all go to? What's happening next? What's going on?
So
Give us
yeah,
the
we're
hot scoop
hoping
too. Sorry, Max, before you go. We only want exclusives.
Yeah.
you're an
We
exclusive.
don't settle for anything other than exclusives.
Well, probably the best exclusive I can try and give is that we have something exciting coming up, but I can't say what it is.
Oh.
But it's still an exclusive, that there's something.
Exclusive letdown.
So hoping it would be like a
Season
half
2,
half.
Big Old House of Fun on Paramount Plus.
I'll say not quite, but in that ballpark, I guess. Yeah.
All right, all right. Anyone else want another
Nice.
go?
Yeah,
Come on,
cool.
let's play some.
No, I
Max is
push
squirming.
you
He's
more.
like, "Don't shut up, guys."
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
But
okay.
yeah, we've got
I get it.
some like, yeah, we just kind of had a really great like a nationwide kind of tour recently, which was really great and did really well. So kind of coming off the back of that, and then yeah, now for the second half of the year, going to be working on a new longer form project, which would be really fun.
Mm.
And then also we've been doing a lot of stuff with our production company as well, with other comedians and stuff, and growing our second YouTube channel, Grouse House, which is a channel that we kind of started as a place for also for Australian alternative comedy, kind of like ours, but not Aunty Donna. So just other people who make great comedy that we like. I think there's like, similarities in terms of just being on the weirder, sillier, crazier kind of side. So we're, yeah, growing that at the moment too, and making some really fun stuff. We had a series on there with Hot Department called Dark Web, that's having its last episode next week, and that's been a really like awesome, fun series to kind of have, and I like personally love, like it's so my taste, and I love that we get to kind of make other things like that as well with other people and get their stuff made, because it's so, I just love getting to see it, and that getting that out there and seeing the reaction and stuff has been really great. So yeah, doing more of that as well going forward.
Awesome. And I can confirm Grouse House is awesome, and the Hot Department Dark Web series, awesome. Yep, love it.
Yes,
Yes.
I concur. It's very interesting.
More batshit crazy, off the wall comedy. It's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. If it's a jam, definitely check out Grass House. We've got more
Yeah.
of that.
Awesome. I reckon that's a
Awesome.
good place to wrap up, unless anyone else wants to try and get a good scoop out of our most humble guest.
No.
Like that. Weaving it in one more time.
Way more time. Yeah.
Thanks, Max.
Thank
Thanks so much
you.
for being with us, and looking forward to seeing what happens next.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. It was fun to chat.
Create a generation on the mic.